For the single arm seated cable row, you can do this a couple different ways. If you're like me and you're in a gym with not a lot of machines, you have the single cable stack, then you can do it seated on the floor, legs out in front of you. If you're in a gym and you have access to a bench with a seated cable row variation, then you can do it that way, sitting on the bench and you're sitting, but with your feet on the ground. But if you're here, you're going to have your feet flexed, and you're going to make sure that the upper body is stacked up fairly tall. You don't want to flare the chest, but you want to make sure that you're not collapsing and you're also not leaning back. You want to be sitting upright so that rib cage is stacked over pelvis, super important whenever you go to grab this cable. When performing the row, you don't want to rotate like crazy, but you do want to allow for a little bit of stretch forward in that upper body and in the lat. And when you pull, you want to pull elbow to the hip. A lot of the time I'll see people when they do the seated cable row, they are shrugging like crazy. You want to drive that elbow to your pocket. So I'm upright, I'm not collapsed, I'm sitting nice and tall, I'm also not leaning back like crazy. And when I pull, important not to lean back. When I perform the row with my feet flexed, I'm going to allow for a little stretch in that upper body, and then I'm pulling the elbow to the hip. I'm bringing that elbow to pocket, like so. If you're sitting and you're doing a seated cable row, sitting on a bench with your feet off of the bench, it's going to be the exact same thing. I tend to, let's say my feet are on the ground and I'm sitting on the bench right now, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually have my hand pressing onto my knee. I do this too, even sitting on the floor, but on the bench for sure, I'm going to be pressing my hand into that opposite knee. And when I row, pulling and performing the same thing. And pressing the hand into the knee, all it does is provide a little bit more of a counter force whenever you are, or a little bit more of a position to brace whenever you are pulling in that row. When you're doing the single arm row too, I press more of my weight into the pad, because usually a seated cable row has a pad to put your foot. I push more of my weight into the foot on the side that I'm rowing, and that's going to provide that counter force, right? So as I'm pulling with my right arm, I'm pushing with that right foot into the pad so that I'm bracing really well for the lift, and I can maximize the amount of load that I pull as I do the single arm cable row from a bench on a machine in the gym.